welcome to another Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is BryanCPSteele, and I'll be your nerd today and any other day that you watch one of my silly little shows. Alright, so today is probably going to be the last of the 5 things that I know I've done kind of a series for a little bit, the 5 things, 5 tips, 5 ways. But I'm actually going to take one from a comment in an earlier video that someone wanted to see. Someone asked specifically about how to deal with when you've got players, 5 ways to deal with players that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Now, even the commenter put it in quotes as well, because, you know, again, in a role-playing game, there is no really supposed to do, you know, there's good behavior, bad behavior, we know that, you know, like, a lot of people use the, well, it's what my character would do to justify bad behavior at the table. And obviously people want to, you know, the DM wants to be able to explore the story that they've got planned. You know, the adventure should, there's an obvious generality to what the adventure is supposed to be, or major, you know, plot points that need to be covered. And, you know, not every game master is going to completely improv from the seat, from behind the screen every session. They're not just going to give you a complete sandbox and be like, all right, what do you want to do? And, you know, more often than not, it's not just going to be a pile of random tables and random encounters of, let's just see what happens. You know, there's almost always going to be a plot and a narrative and a story and an arc and an adventure that you're trying to do. And sometimes players get it. They find enjoyment out of specifically going off the rails. Maybe they're having a particularly bad day, and they're just like, you know, I don't want all this deep drama, to just give me some combat. And so they do something that's out of the ordinary just to specifically, you know, spark up a combat. Or your DM is about ready to go into this big, long, you need this NPC to open the gates to Niflheim, and, you know, and one of the players is like, all right, well, I kill the guy. You know, like, there's all kinds of, there's horror stories about players that want to be disruptive, that want to, you know, specifically be like, haha, you know, we got one over on the DM. But overall, most games want to see the progression of the plot. And at least most of the people at the table probably do as well. Meaning that occasionally a DM will run into a situation where they feel like the agency of the game is being taken away from them, because this player is doing weird random things, or maybe just decided that their character has decided to be a homicidal maniac and go true murder hobo. You know, like, there's lots of scenarios where the DM wants to be able to, you know, step in or rein in the players that have kind of gone off the rails. Now, I have had episodes before talking about specifically how, you know, even the term on the rails implies a railroaded plot line, and there's definitely a fine line between being railroaded and being like, nope, this is the next scene, nope, this is the next scene, nope, it doesn't matter what you do, this is the next scene, and feeling railroaded, where you're like, it didn't feel like we had any other choices, we didn't have any options, we tried to do things and you told us no. You know, there's lots and lots of, you know, peaks and valleys when it comes to how structured a DM needs to be to keep the players moving in the plot line. Or, you know, have a game where they go, you know, we're not on a time crunch, so if they don't get around to that plot point, that's fine. We can have a couple of sessions with them doing whatever they want. You know, like, I will adapt. I will create the story around them. You know, or, you know, I hate to use the term filler sessions, but, like, occasionally, you know, especially if it's you just got done with a really tense Maybe a big dramatic moment or a mini chapter arc within your story finished. You just exhausted all of your everythings to deal with the big bad guy. Sometimes you do need a session that's not real plot heavy. That's just kind of let's take it easy. Do some partying, do some shopping, spend some of the treasure, maybe meet a new NPC or something. There's lots of ways to deal with that sort of thing, but there are those sorts of sessions very rarely are going to be the entire thing. They're not going to be the whole campaign of filler, meaning that there is going to be a plot. And if there is going to be a plot, then the players should be wanting to go along with it. That's part of that is to help make it, make an intriguing plot, make it something that they want to be part of, try and include their characters and what they, their backstories and things, try and include them and work them into the plot. So from a narrative standpoint, they want to be involved as well. There's a lot to it, but that's not what this episode is about. We can always talk about, involving characters and plots and stuff later on. This is someone asked specifically for 5 ways to deal with players that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And again, supposed to be doing, and put that in air quotes, because that term is relative. I've got 5 ways I've written down that I think will shed a little bit of light of how I feel in the situation. My personal opinion is that most games are 70% planning, 30% improv. Meaning that you want to know the story, you want to know the setting, you want to have a general idea of, a more than general idea of how do I deal with the plot as it moves. But you also have to have enough stuff in your back pocket that when your players throw you for a loop, you're ready. And whether that's you've got some encounters that can happen anywhere off to the side, ready to rock and roll, or if it's just a matter of listen to what your players are talking and doing and thinking and adapt. There's a lot to it, but there's a reason why dungeon masters and game masters and storytellers and rune keepers and whatever your game uses as the term for the person behind the screen. There's a reason why they tend to be in short supply, and most people are players and rather than the people who run the games, because it is a skill set and it takes practice and it takes the ability to bend. You can't just be a draconian, enforcer. You won't have players stick around with you for very long. All that being said, these 5 things to try and help a game go smoothly when the players are, I hate to use the term being insubordinate, but being like narratively insubordinate. Narratively insubordinate is the name of a punk band somewhere. It has to be. I think that these tips might be helpful for you, but the big thing is when you're running a game, you and your players have to have the understanding that the goal is the game. The goal is the enjoyment of the game. The goal is not to be obeyed, or the goal is not to, quit screwing everything up. The goal is just to make sure that everyone at the table is having a good time, and that does include you. And sometimes, if this story is what you've written and you really want it to see to the end, see it come to fruition, part of your good time is not seeing that completely just derailed and smashed. Which brings us to, I think, the number one, and this is probably the number one skill for any game of any type, of any relationship, and that's communication. If there is a player who thinks they're being funny by doing all of the goofy things and specifically being like, no, I don't want to do the thing. I don't want to help the guy. I want to burn the orphanage down. he might think that he's having a blast, and maybe that their ability to see what the rest of the players are doing or saying, or maybe he sees it as a funny joke. He's like, ha ha ha, we're having a good time, not realizing that everybody else is like, yeah, dude, we hate kind of seeing the what are you going to do next show. Communication is rule number one. And that, again, that goes for anything. But when it comes to a player or players that are specifically not giving everyone that beneficial interaction toward the narrative, toward the plot, toward whatever, and they're taking away fun at the table, whether it's yours or other players or whatnot, you need to be comfortable enough with your relationship with your players to tell them and ask them, hey, if that's the kind of game you want to play, we can try and cook up another campaign, or maybe this campaign's too serious for you, or maybe we need to discuss when I said during session 0 that you guys are going to be playing the heroes of the local lands, and in the first session you decided to burn down the farm that you guys were living at. There just needs to be some talking about that and figuring out why these things are happening. And sometimes a player may have a decent answer. That player may very well have thought this through, and that oh no, I didn't realize that the plot was getting in the way of what I had planned. And sometimes that player might also just not realize that what they're doing is not okay. They might just, again, they might think it's just a fun time. Everyone's laughing with me. Them not realizing that everyone else is laughing nervously because they're like, do we want to do this? So it's about communication. It's about talking to your players. It's about talking to your group about what they want to get out of the game, what they want to expect, and what to be ready for at the table. Because let's say you've got this really unbelievably deep, dramatic, semi-emotional, session planned, and or maybe even campaign, like you're wanting to do, Critical Role without all the, dick and fart jokes, like you're wanting like, deep gravitas, and they all come to the table and they want Dungeon Crawl Carl. They want talking cats and silly Xbox achievements. Those are two different things. And if you didn't talk about this, if you did not explain what you wanted to do, they can't be expected to just know. They can't be expected to understand that you wanted this deep, deep game and they want goofy, schlocky nonsense. It's not it isn't that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They just didn't understand the assignment. They didn't understand what was happening at the table. And that's a communication issue. So one of the biggest things that have come up in the last 5-10 years in role-playing games is the idea of a session 0. And I think that the session 0 is awesome because not only does it help new players understand the system more, because you can take a break and go, okay, so this is what your skills do, this is what your stuff does, this is what your character is capable of, so it doesn't turn into, everything doesn't go some grinding to a halt when you're in a game, because it gets around to your initiative and you have no idea what your character's gonna do, you don't know what you can do, you are, total analysis paralysis, which slows everything down. Whereas in a session 0, you can kind of walk them through at least a little bit of, well, this is what your guy is capable of doing, and it'll make things move a little easier, hopefully. But also, at that session 0, it is the best time, the best opportunity before the game actually begins, before the narrative starts to scroll and people start having interactions, is you can set the tone for your players and let them know this is what's going to be expected of you. This is the feel of the game. And then from there on out, it's up to you to make sure you maintain that communication as a GM, and also don't try and pull a fast one. Don't tell them, oh yeah, it's fine, everything's great. Let's do the white shorts, red boxers, throw on some water wings, let's be a fish milk. You can tell them that's okay, and then when they 3 sessions into the game, you go, okay, now that I've got your attention, dun dun dun, it's really serious and deep, and then get upset that you switched it up on them. So again, communication is key. It's the most simple, but it's also, in my opinion, the most important way to keep players doing what is expected of them at the table. One of the other things, one of the other ways is that I like to use is spotlight scenes. Spotlight scenes, you tell your players from the very, very beginning. You tell them that there will be times during this game that we have sessions that are a little more focused on a player, a very specific, shining the spotlight on this person's background or this person's history, maybe even a flashback session that's only dealing with him and them and their background characters, NPCs, and history. You let them know that they will at some point be in the spotlight and the story will be about them. And the reason why I consider this one of the ways to help keep players to doing what they're supposed to do is that it allows that player to more or less kind of sort of take the reins of an adventure, take the reins of a session or two, and they kind of get to decide where things are going, and you're really focusing on trying to bring out more from that character in particular. Because a lot of times when players choose to do random things or specifically go off of the off the beaten track, or they take that in character, I'm taking my stance and this is how it is, even if it's kind of contrary to the plot, it's because in their head they've got, again, not always, there's always agents of chaos, but most of the time it's because there's a reason that they're not. Maybe in their backstory they've decided that they just hate gnomes. They're super anti-gnome, and they may not have ever mentioned that in passing because you haven't had any gnome characters, right? I mean, gnome NPCs, or there hasn't been any interaction, or maybe there's a character who is revealed to be undead, and you're even though you guys have been allies for a while, the cleric is like, or we'll even go further, the druid is like, nope, being undead is outside of the natural cycle. Hate this person now. I can't believe, that can throw a monkey wrench in the plot line as well. Maybe that character, that NPC, that undead NPC is really, really important to the future of the plot, and now you've got this player character who's like, nope, I want to kill that guy in the first opportunity I get, and you're starting to go, I don't know how to deal with this. Can you just realize that they're supposed to be a good guy? And sometimes that's not going to be enough. That player might have real reasoning. Giving them a spotlight session can be awesome. Let's say they run into, I'm going to use that actual, that framework. Known an NPC for a long time. Turns out that this guy is some nasty, undead creature. Maybe he was even good aligned. He's undead only in the fact that he's not alive, but he's not some kind of cursed horror that eats people in the street or anything like that. And the druid goes bananas and is like, I can't hang out with it. I don't care what's happened in the past. I'm not going to stand by this undead monstrosity. He is an anathema to nature. And in the first combat I get the opportunity, I'm going to make sure I center my moonbeam on him. There's this obvious animosity. After that session, when that animosity shows up, DM goes to the druid player and goes, hey, I'm thinking about next, we ended on a real tense note. I'm thinking maybe on the next session, we give you the spotlight. I would like to run a session where you are playing a younger version of your character, or maybe an ancestor, or give me in 2 sentences, what kind of scenario, why does your character hate the undead so much that this interaction immediately just, went flat. And hopefully the druid player has a reason for it, because otherwise then they're just being problematic to be problematic. But maybe they have a reason for it. Maybe they're like, well, yeah, in my backstory I talked about how, both my parents are, both my parents are dead. Maybe I didn't mention that, well, they were killed by some necromancer and were raised, that later on I had to put them down. That could be an awesome single one-shot spotlight session for that druid, where that druid is playing his character, the other players are playing, members of his past, maybe past alliances, other family members, cousin Tony, the paladin or whatever, and you run him through the time that necromancer assaulted his village, and at the end of this session, he's the one that has to he has to put his animated dead parents back to rest. Turn it into a positive, and then that way when you go back to the regular game, everybody at the table understands why he's doing what he's doing, why that druid is being the way they are. And as a game master, you secretly got an entire session of deep character-driven things, even if it's mostly combat. You got a session where you can look a little further in that druid character, understand a little more, and then maybe do your own version of adapting. Do a little bending with the plot, make it work a little better. Maybe, unless it's super integral that this dude is, undead, maybe you explain that he's just cursed, and, he's looking for the gem that will return him to the land of the living. And now that druid has the opportunity of, instead of just destroying him, undoing it. There's ways to try and make it about, find out why a player is doing what they're doing, and if there's a good reason behind it, find a way to spotlight it and turn it into something. And rather than scolding them for doing weird, turn it into something cooler, an enjoyable session, an enjoyable moment. And then when you go back to the main plot, the main narrative again, it won't feel as weird and out of place. It won't feel like that player is not doing what they're supposed to do. It feels like they're exploring a part of their own character and giving everyone else now the opportunity to interact and role play with that, which they may not have had before because it was a complete mystery. So I think spotlight sessions are cool because, yeah, some people might be like, well, it's rewarding bad behavior. It might not be bad behavior. It might just be they're playing their character in a way that you weren't aware of of what it came from, or where it came from. Or heck, they may have only semi-fleshed it out, and they're doing this to try and make more out of it, so you give them the opportunity to do so. Obviously, all that being said, if the spotlight session just basically shows that, yeah, they didn't have anything planned, why they hate that undead guy. They just wanted to hate the undead guy because they didn't like the NPC, or they didn't want the NPC at the table, or maybe they had a bad day that day and they're like, I just want players, I just want to be able to do the thing. Offering someone that spotlight session, trying to make more out of that situation, out of that wrinkle in the narrative, may help iron out more for the narrative or build more stuff for the future down the road. I think it's a good concept. Conversely, The one that has these have probably been, this has popped up a couple different times. The idea of the quantum ogre. Now, obviously, we're not going to say find the monster stats for a quantum ogre. The idea of the quantum ogre is that when the players decide not to encounter something, they choose to ignore what's being put in front of them. They choose to not do what they're supposed to do, in efforts in to go do whatever they want. The quantum ogre states, the concept of the quantum ogre states that basically, if as a DM my plan was to have an ogre attack you on the path from point A to point B, and at point A, the players decide, we don't even want to go to point B. Let's go to point F instead. Let's go do another thing. But that encounter was very important for me because that ogre has got an item, that the item has a scroll, and the scroll tells you the plot, or whatever the case may be. The concept of that interaction can be moved someplace else. That ogre exists on multiple planes of existence, not obviously in reality, but like instead of having the ogre jump them in the forest on the way to point B, the next time they're in a place where I think an ogre could exist, I insert that quantum ogre in that place. And I don't mean like literally he teleports, like he goes from the forest to the lake. I mean from a narrative standpoint, the players didn't know that there was an ogre that was going to jump them in the woods anyway, so having him jump them on the docks on their way to the boat works just the same. It's the same encounter, it's the same result, it's the same plot point, it's the same interaction that the players were going to get, that you needed the players to do someplace else, but you've just kind of displaced it and put it in a different position. So that way the plot still gets the moment that it needs. They still get the interaction that you wanted, and the players still felt like they had the agency to make the call, and they weren't being railroaded. Well, you've got to go to the forest because you've got to meet this guy. You've got to go to the forest. You've got to meet this guy. They're still getting to make their choices, but you're still getting to make sure that there are instances that are supposed to happen. Of course, there's ways to do the quantum ogre theory better, seamless. And in my opinion, the number one way to make sure that's seamless is you never tell your players it was supposed to be someplace else. You don't even bring it up. You don't go, man, when you guys went down to the wharf, it threw me for a loop. Nope. You just have the encounter, do the encounter, they get the information, and the game continues. Because players that I mentioned earlier in the episode that there are players out there that really enjoy throwing monkey wrenches in the system, and I like to watch my DM dance. If they are never told that what they did created an unplanned wrinkle for you, so that you had to pivot, that you had to change, they won't get that, serotonin bump from getting one over on you, because as far as they're concerned, you were ready, you were playing. You whether they went this way, that way, or this way, you had goals and concepts in mind. Whether it was the quantum ogre or something else, you knew what you were doing and you handled it. Now, as soon as the session's over and they're all laughing, like, man, I know you really wanted us to go to the forest. As long as you don't look at them and go, yeah, I really, really did, and it sucked that you didn't, so, I had to completely reroute my encounter so that way it would end up on the wharf instead of in the forest. That, even though it's displaced past the moment, that level of frustration, the amount of control that I'm doing a lot of air quotes this episode, the control and the influence that they've had on you by choosing not to do what you've kind of urged them toward, they still get that serotonin bump. They just get it later. They get the haha, man, we really got one. And then so now the next time they have an opportunity to do the same thing and possibly throw another monkey wrench in the works, they're going to try and get that reward. So you simply do not let them know that that happened. You just adjust the encounters. You move them to where they need to be. Unless it's just impossible, they decide to go wandering off into the desert. You're not going to be able to have them meet the Triton King. That's obviously regular rules of DMing apply, but if you have to apply the Quantum Ogre, like you've got to move an encounter because they didn't do the thing that you thought they were going to, or the thing that the plot sort of suggests, just don't tell them that you did. Let them think that their decisions led them to this cool thing and that you were always prepared. And that will help. It will help keep the story moving, smoothly, but also it will help deflate the sails of those players that are trying to mess with you on purpose. The last two, numbers 4 and 5, kind of go hand in hand, but they're opposite sides of the same coin. The one that I think is one of the easiest to apply, but also the hardest to not let it turn into something negative, is players that have consequences for their actions. If a player is like, that character's decides, nah, we don't need to sit. You said that there's a temple out of the woods that's being attacked by ogres. We don't want to mess with ogres, and we're all of a different faith. I don't think we care about that temple. Then the consequences you apply when those players aren't doing what the plot suggests or what they're supposed to do. I hate to use that term. That you write down a couple of things that logically would happen. The ogres overtake the temple. The temple gets burnt to the ground. You maybe have them meet some clergy that have lost their powers. Maybe if there's a cleric in the party, don't let them. You're allowed to have cantrips and level 1 spells. Why can't I access my second levels or higher? Oh, well, because the gods talk to each other, and you actively allowed a holy place to be desecrated. Well, we just didn't want to risk our lives. Adventure is risk, man. Come on. Maybe it's time to atone. Maybe it's time to go out and see if there's something that can be saved. Maybe, turn it into a plot line, but have there be consequences for their actions. That player that decides to, steal a bunch of stuff because, I know we're supposed to be the heroes, but I'm gonna steal the all the gems out of that guy's coffers, or as soon as the storekeeper runs in the back, I take a bunch of stuff. Maybe the next day they find out that somebody else got blamed for that theft and is currently in. They walk out of their hotel and they walk past the store and they see somebody in a crow cage, crying and weeping that they're innocent, and you have them go. It's the effective neon sign of, hey, talk to this guy, and they go, what happened? This town hasn't used punishment like this forever. They said that I stole all of the apples off of, they told me I stole all the gems out of the store. I wasn't even there. There's obviously the player could not care, but this falls under the communication situation. But the chances of you having a table full of players that don't care, much slimmer than having one player who did a thing, and then now the rest of those characters go, hey, dude, that's your fault. We need to set that right. I don't know how, but we need to find a way to set that right. And it could almost that sort of behavior could police itself if they see that making those decisions, making those that player who goes, yeah, I push over the idol. Why? Because I can. I set that I set the wooden idol in the forest on fire. Oh, okay. And then maybe that person for the next like 10 long rests or any time that they're in that forest, you make them do this. You make them do a wisdom save every time that they do take a long rest because of the horrible, gut wrenching, bowel emptying nightmares that they suffer because they desecrated the idol of the forest god. Like it will require a DM to think a little, try and figure out what might actually affect the player or players that's causing these problems, and sort of hit them where they hurt. And I don't want to say that as like, because I know a lot of people are like, well, DMs shouldn't be adversarial. You're not. You are basically, the player chose a path that maybe they were urged against, or specifically they chose this because they thought that it would be, against the grain. And as a DM, you're having your lived in setting and world and adventure react accordingly. You're not being mean. They made their bed, it's time for them to lie in it. That's what the consequences are about. And I know that there are a lot of DMs out there that don't feel good doing that, but I have to ask you this. If you don't feel good imposing the consequences of these players and their actions, it's never going to stop. You have to find a way to realize that you're trying to make everyone feel better at the table and have more fun out of the game, and maybe trying to turn lemonade out of lemons. They're doing these goofy things, and you're like, well, I'm going to make plot points out of it. Haha, bully for you. You thought you were throwing me for a loop. Well, what you did is you fueled my creative engine to create a new plot line. That's all what I mean by consequences. I don't mean like literally punish the player. You don't. Everyone else levels, you don't. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the story can be enriched with negative impacts based off of these alternate things that the player has chosen their character to do, no matter how nonsensical. And then the last one is the opposite side of that coin, and this is one that I like to. I think I'm less inclined to do this because I'm not a Santa Claus DM. I'm a little more Grinchy, and that's targeted rewards, and that's basically, instead of imposing a bunch of consequences and penalties for what the player who's choosing to be this agent of the chaos, instead of punishing them or imposing all these consequences, you instead highlight the fact that a player did the thing. Maybe you do the big neon sign of, hey, NPC here, the temple forest, the forest is burning, the temple's out there, we need help. And then one player above all the rest of them are like, what should we do? And then that one druid just runs and is like, I shapeshift into a horse because I can move faster. I shapeshift into a cheetah because I can move the fastest. And I'm going to get there and I'm going to help. And then when all the encounter is all done and whatnot, either maybe someone from the temple gives them some kind of reward, or if you've got a high magic setting or a setting where there is a deeper connection with magic or something like that, maybe the spirit of the forest. I mentioned the spirit of the forest that's imposing the nightmares. The opposite is also true. Maybe during the next long rest, a forest spirit approaches the druid where everyone else can see, so they don't think it's fake, and specifically is like, you heard the plight of my people, you heard the cry of the forest, and you saved my shrine. Here's this really awesome one-of-a-kind item, or here's this really cool boon that maybe isn't a feat, but like something similar. You now have, damage resistance 2 to all the lightning damage or acid damage or poison damage or whatever. You give that character some kind of bonus, some kind of reward that is obviously targeted based off of, hey, thanks for upholding the plot. Thanks for really being the vanguard of making sure this narrative moves forward. And it makes sense to do it at the table because you're not playing favorites, you're rewarding something that happens. And as long as you make sure that all of the players know that's what that was from, you are going to see more likely players reacting to taking the bait, doing the things that are kind of laid out in front of them for the narrative, because they may think they may always go back to that moment and go, man, remember when the druid just didn't question, didn't overplan, and just did the thing because the thing needed doing, and then got this cool Feywild reward. Maybe the next time something needs doing, we act with passion and we do the thing, and your game may move not necessarily faster toward the plot, but less likely to just completely ignore it if they think that they're going to. I hate to be like players are selfish, but if they think their player's going to get, or their character's going to get something special and cool by doing the narrative, most players are going to want to do the cool thing to get the cool thing. So yeah, targeted rewards, and also trying to make sure that the rewards that people do for these moments in game, if you can find a way to tie it not only to the narrative of what happened, so that way it reinforces, hey, if you do what the story kind of requests of you, instead of trying to derail everybody, you get these cool benefits. But also, if you can try to make those benefits really good for that character, let's back it up just slightly for that druid again. Turned wild shaped into a cheetah, ran out to the temple, saved the day. Next time everyone gets together for camp, fairy spirit comes out and says, "Oh my God, thank you for saving my temple." When others hesitated and questioned the nature of things, you acted, and because of that, I am blessing you with a unique wild shape that is basically one of your wild shapes every day allows you to turn into a mini treant. That druid is going to be like, all right, cool. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to be able to go tell their gamer friends and be like, so this is what happened. And everyone else at that table is going to go, that's cool. That's rad. Our ally has this really neat thing. I wonder what my character would get in a situation where I am the hero of the moment. I am the one who pushes the flag forward and makes things happen. They may wonder, they may ask, they may try and figure that out. And I think that's one of the best ways that can allow a game master to feel like they're being nice and magnanimous. They can avoid, for the game masters that really don't feel like punishing their players, it's the carrot versus stick argument as a DM. And I think that they both have their place, but it's really up to you to figure out how you want to apply those. And those are my 5 ways for today. And I know that I could probably come up with more, and I could probably discuss each of these a little further. But I think that that's a decent amount of information for you guys to bring back to your table. And for you who asked specifically in the comment section for this topic, I hope that I gave you enough fuel to deal with whatever you're dealing with at the table. Because again, I think that's the goal. Awesome. So. Next up is the Week in Bryan. I still have not made the template thing that goes that's going to cut the video to go first part, Week in Bryan part. But if you were just here for the information and you don't care about the Week in Bryan, Awesome. We will see you in 2 weeks. Next week, I am away at a show. I'm at MomoCon, which we'll talk about it here in a second. Yeah, have a great day. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and be part of the comments below, because that's where we get a lot of our information, and also where you possibly get to win the comment raffle. And past winners can tell you get some pretty cool stuff every month I ship out. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Now, dun dun dun, on to the week in Bryan. So this week has been a great week on a positive level, or on a personal level. Weather's been nice. I had to do a little bit of constructive accounting to move some things around, but I got some bills paid off. I got the car fixed. It's been a real kind of positive momentum week, which is good because I needed it. The gym has been productive. Again, I'm still not in the greatest of shape, but I feel better than I have in a while, so that is a plus. Hobbying, I actually did some. I know it's been a while, but I got some free time. We get to work stuff, I'll let you know, but I freed up some space in my schedule, so I'm not quite so work, sleep, work, sleep. So I managed to get my Game Envy light mounted, got it working, got a bunch of models put together, a bunch of Cybertronic Trenchwork stuff that I needed to get put together. Got some primer on some things. Didn't really get a lot of painting done, but I got a lot of prep work done. So the next time that I get to sit down and actually, put brush to model, I've got a bunch of stuff that I can do it with. So, but it felt good, and the Game Envy light is really good. It is really good. I can't explain it. It's got like two different styles of light. It's got a warm light and it's got a crisp light. I prefer the crisp light. It's easier on my eyes and allows me to get better true color. But I think the way that the arms on the light can go kind of around the back of my head and give me a little more backlight, I think it's going to be very, very, very helpful when I actually get into painting some of this stuff. So big plus to the guys over at Game Envy. Thank you so much for getting me that light at Adepticon, because it's a game changer, and I'm very excited to get more use out of it. Gaming wise, I haven't done much. I played some video games, some playtest games of minis. That's really it. Part of that is because one of my kids had an 18th birthday. That same kid has a graduation party that I'm baking a cake for, and there's just been a lot going on, so I haven't had a lot of time to do. I think I got like one playtest game in of Warzone, and maybe 1.5 kind of sessions of testing some org stuff for Zeogen. It's not my normal routine of stuff, and our normal playtest role-playing game session for Secret Project ended up getting canceled, or rather postponed, because one of the members is leaving the country. Not fleeing the country, he's going someplace and going to be there for a while. So we had to do some adjustment, but I had a lot of fun playing Helldivers, and also received my my contributor copy of Shadowrun Takedown. I mean, technically it's my Kickstarter copy because I also backed it, but I forgot, honestly, that was incoming. So when the box showed up, I was like, oh, cool. It's a fun game. It's fast paced. You gotta get used to it. There's a bunch of familiar faces in it. Of if you watched World of Shadows, or if you've read some of my works, there's definitely some familiar familiar people running around in that board game. I really wanted to get Hollywood in it, but it didn't happen because they already kind of had a Street Sam and they didn't need another one. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for gaming wise. Work wise, so not only did I finish the Throne World source book to get it sent off for editing and things, but I finished the Shadowrun novel. I mean, it still has to go through editing, and then I got to ratify all the changes and anything that they need me to clean up. So there's still way more to deal with it, but it felt so good finishing that. Because it's been delayed, it's been pushed back, it's been changed, it's been pushed back. Just knowing that the main manuscript is done, yeah, the money's going to be nice, but it's that's such a huge weight off my shoulders. And then also next month when John and I get together at Origins, I get to talk about what we're going to do for the next one. I know immediately like, but Bryan, you just finished that novel. Why are you immediately going to stress out for the next one? The only reason I was stressed out for this one was because I had so much going on. I had overbooked my schedule, and I had really thought that this book was going to be a super fast book. But it turns out writing a story about writing multiple stories told from a perspective of your friends' iconic characters, it's hard. Because you want to do it right. You want to make sure that you get all the details right. You want to make sure you get their tone of voice right. You want to make sure that if they, in one of the streams that they played this character on, mentioned their mother's first name, you want to make sure you get that right. So there was a lot more to this that, it was awesome. It was a great exercise, and it really taught me a lot about writing from the perspective of someone else's character, that they may not have all of the details. What's their comfort level about, well, you mentioned that you work for a gang. What's that gang's name? Oh, okay. Hey, what's your signature gun? I don't know. I've never seen you pull. I've never played with you. You've ever actually shot somebody. What gun did you use? There was a lot of little moving parts and tone of voice and frame that I think made for better stories, but it also slowed me down and made me a little anxious about doing some of the things to some of the characters. So either way, I'm very excited to have turned that in and to talk to John about what the next one will be, so I can start getting my brain around what that story will look like. Let's see what else. Work-wise, those two big things have now opened up my stress levels have dropped significantly because I don't have anything that's like waiting behind. Everything else is current. I'm working on one of the Silver Deep adventures for Dungeon in a Box. That's coming along nicely. It's a little higher level than I'm used to writing for, which is fine because it means that I can I don't have to pull so many punches when it comes to encounter building. And that adventure is only like 10,000, 12,000 words. It's not that big of a deal. It'll come together. It'll be great. I started working on. I don't want to say what it is because I don't think we've announced it. But one of the monthly download supplements for Everyday Heroes. I'm adding one of those. I'm adding one of those to the repertoire, and it is coming together awesomely. It was not something when I initially heard us talking about it in the meeting that it was going to be a thing, and then Dave asked me if I could, if I had any ideas, and I was like, well, now that I think about it, I could do something with this. Now that I'm actually putting it together, I think it's going to be super cool, especially when it comes to the organized play at Evil Genius, the Ego program, where players play kind of they're redemption agents. Redemption being a kind of clandestine super spy program that finds heroes, that finds everyday heroes, that finds people in everyday society and kind of turns them into field agents because they have some skill, some special, some je ne sais quoi that makes them the perfect fit for this sort of, you know, world encompassing, multiverse saving organization. And they're called bonus features. My bonus feature that I'm putting out, the supplement, really leans hard into a couple of concepts that have come up in the past as, could we do this? And so I am very excited to tell you more. It has not been marketed yet, so I can't say anything. But when I can, I'll definitely tell you about it because I'm excited. I think it's gonna be fun. You know, even though it's a small project and it's just a little monthly download, I'm definitely going to tell people all about it. I have started putting together some things for Patreon, which again, I hate to harp, but if you are not a member of my Patreon, you absolutely should be. Because lately I've been putting out a lot of D&D, D&D stuff for my Patreon members. But I think there is a very good chance that I may start releasing some official, unofficial Warzone scenarios. I might. Someone gave me the great. I don't remember who it was, but they had a great idea of on my Patreon when Thundercats goes live, and everybody and their brother can have the book. I should put out some stat blocks because everybody knows I really want to do a Masters of the Universe role-playing game, and until that becomes a real thing, I should create NPC stat blocks for obviously I don't want to use a trademarked character, but like instead of having Clawful, maybe I'll have Clawsome. You know, a crab guy that has, you know, create stat blocks for a bunch of stuff so people could use the Thundercats role-playing game as a stand-in and make their own Masters of the Universe game using that until someone eventually hires me and tells me to make my own, or someone had a really cool idea on one of the Warzone groups is come up with a couple of, you know, intergalactic heroes stat blocks for things in the Mutant Chronicles. Like, it's cool. I have to be careful because these are a lot of licensed properties that I work with. So a lot of things may be, you know, wink, wink. Hey, you know, we all know that Skeletor is who he's supposed to be. And you know, Evil Nancy is not, you know, or Lynn the Evil, you know, like I know I don't normally like to do those sorts of things, but if it does give me an opportunity to kind of populate other people's games with the concept of Masters of the Universe stuff, I kind of dig it. So I'm going to look more into that later. But please, if you're not part of my Patreon, for like $5 a month, you can join and get free role-playing game content every month. I make sure by the end of the first week that I upload something that's hopefully useful in some capacity. So please join, become a part of the thing, and then just do your duty. Now, I did want to go ahead and say there will not be, I mentioned it earlier, but you might not have been paying attention, so here you go. There will not be an episode next week because I am down at MomoCon, being a special guest down there. And the following week I will do, my episode will be kind of a two-parter. We're going to do hey, this is how MomoCon was, because this is my first time going to this show. They're bringing me down as a special guest to do a bunch of cool stuff, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be at a new show. I haven't done this one before. So I want to do most of that episode is probably going to be talking about how cool MomoCon was and tell you about all the great stuff. But then also, I want to do an unboxing and a quick overview of one of my friends. He has been making a card game for a long time, and I want to go ahead and do that. So Next week is going to probably be a twofer, where maybe, or you know what, maybe I wait a third week to do the card unboxing, so I can dedicate an entire episode to it. Whatever the case may be, you're not going to see me next week. 2 weeks, I'm going to do at least the overview on MomoCon, maybe more. So until then, for 2 whole weeks, I want you guys to be safe, have fun, get your shots, wear a mask, don't lick doorknobs, just try not to be a jerk, and maybe make every room a little happier than when you got there, and I think we'll be okay. So 2 weeks, have fun, play some games, because you know I will. Bye, guys.